Hey everyone, it's me, Dr. Whimsy, and today we're talking about 8 reasons why you should stop eating wheat. And the reason I decided to talk about this particular subject is because a lot of the people who come to see me in my offices here in Los Angeles do so because they are having a lot of gastric upset, and they're also having resistant weight loss. And those are a couple of the things we want to talk about when we talk about giving up wheat. So we're going to just go through the 8 reasons why you should stop eating wheat, and hopefully it can answer all the questions you may have about this subject. The first reason we want to give up eating wheat is because, number one, it's extremely genetically modified. It's been genetically modified since we first started to grow wheat. The first history of growing wheat goes all the way back to Babylon and Egypt, about 10 to 11,000 years ago. Now, human beings have, contrary to popular belief, been eating grain for a very long time, not 10, 11,000 years, but actually more like 1,000,000 years. The difference is that we were harvesting wild grains and we were preparing them, and then around 10, 11,000 years ago, we started to develop agriculture around areas where we had water, easy access to water, and that was the Nile and Babylon. The Babylonian area were the 2 areas of civilization where we start to see a lot of early grain cultivation. Now that form of wheat was called Einkorn, and it actually contained a much simpler genetic it was a simpler genetic profile than what we see today with the triticum wheat. And as a result of that, we often will see a lot more allergies in modern wheat than we did probably in the earlier Einkorn wheat. Now you can get Einkorn wheat by ordering it. I think it's available on Amazon.com. If you're concerned about allergies and you think you might do better on a more primitive wheat, you could try the Einkorn or the heirloom ancient wheat and see if you do better on that. But that is one of the problems with the modern wheat, is it's just very genetically different, and we're seeing a lot more allergy with the wheat. The other problem is that even the organic wheat seems to be sprayed, and the reason why wheat gets sprayed is because they're trying to avoid vermin from coming and eating the wheat. This is a problem in any society that grows a lot of grain, has a lot of agriculture. It starts to attract vermin. An example of some of the problems that can happen when the grain attracts vermin would be things like the bubonic plague, where you grow a lot of grain and it attracts rats, and then rats have fleas, and then that in turn carries diseases. So the wheat gets sprayed, and a lot of the times people will actually have an adverse reaction to the chemicals that have been sprayed on the wheat. The second reason you should stop avoiding wheat is because of exorphins. Exorphins are similar to endorphins, and what endorphins are is they are basically our brain's ability to make substances that are similar to morphine. So like morphine, wheat gets broken down in our digestive tracts into something called exorphins, and these exorphins can cross the blood-brain barrier and actually have an impact on brain function. They can cause foggy brain or weak brain, where we have trouble organizing our thoughts. We may feel disoriented or foggy brain, but it's also addictive. People will start to crave the wheat and become a little bit cranky when they don't get their wheat. So that's the second reason, is the addictive properties found in the byproducts of digesting wheat, exorphins. The third reason has to do with the high glycemic index. And the problem with a high glycemic index food is that it can cause visceral fat or an increase in abdominal belly fat. And the reason why that happens is because when you have a rise in glucose, something with a high glycemic index can cause a huge rise in glucose, and that in turn causes a huge rise in insulin. Well, all kinds of things happen when we have a rise in insulin. For starters, you may see a rise in cortisol, and your body may begin to start increasing abdominal or visceral fat, and that's the type of fat that's really hard to get rid of. But you also might see an elevation in cortisol, and that in turn can have an effect on thyroid function, because elevated cortisol can lead to increases in reverse T3 or inactive forms of thyroid hormone. And so the third reason that you should stop eating wheat has to do with its high glycemic index and its effect on increased abdominal belly fat. The fourth reason has to do with irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel diseases, and autoimmune conditions like celiac disease. Irritable bowel syndrome is a condition where you might have gas, bloating, upset stomach, and really have trouble digesting the wheat, but you don't actually have an allergy and you don't have an autoimmune condition. IBD, irritable bowel disease, is an autoimmune condition. An example would be Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, and the autoimmune condition known as celiac disease. So for all of those reasons, you may want to give up eating wheat, because people who give up wheat tend to improve if they have those conditions. The fifth reason why you should stop eating wheat has to do with the effects of inflammation on the aging process. Well, because wheat can be highly inflammatory, we talked about elevation in cortisol. Cortisol can become elevated when there's inflammation. Inflammation can then lead to aging. And this is because wheat is highly allergic, raises cortisol, causes inflammation. A lot of people have an allergic reaction to it. A lot of people have a sensitivity to it, and that in turn can raise inflammatory markers. Well, what happens when you have an elevation in inflammatory markers? Inflammatory markers can actually reduce the potency of the antioxidants you might be consuming, even if you're on a really great diet. And that's because inflammation causes free radicals, and free radicals reduce the benefits of the antioxidants you're consuming. And then what happens as a consequence of that is aging. And so the fifth reason you should stop eating wheat is because it may increase or create rapid aging. The sixth reason you should stop eating wheat has to do with heart disease. And this has to do with the relationship between increased belly fat and coronary artery disease. And that's because one of the ways in which our heart creates energy to feed itself is by converting fatty acids to energy. And so consequently, fatty acids may build around the heart. So when you're consuming a food that's high in, has a high glycemic index and causes an increase in insulin, you may also see a development of fat, not just around the abdominal area, but also around the heart itself, and that can cause increased risk for coronary artery disease, as can the inflammation that's been previously noted. So the sixth reason to stop eating wheat is increased risk for coronary artery disease. For that reason, reason number 6, you should stop eating wheat. It's a connection between that and heart disease. That is the 6th reason. Number 7 has to do with brain function. We've talked about this, and we already have talked about that. We talked about exorphins and the fact that that can have an impact on the brain. But also blood sugar dysregulation can have an effect on the brain and lead to crashes. So if you have an increase in insulin in order to deal with the increase in glucose, that yo-yo up and down between insulin going up, going down, can actually cause foggy brain or difficulty constructing thoughts. And so the 7th reason to quit eating wheat is to improve brain function. And finally, number 8, the 8th reason has to do with skin health, and that is because people who have wheat sensitivities can have leaky gut, a breakdown of the digestive tract, abdominal upset, and that in turn can lead to other problems like eczema and skin conditions. Skin conditions that are associated with gluten sensitivity include eczema and psoriasis, but there are other types of skin irritations that may actually improve by giving up wheat. An example would be rosacea that's associated with lupus, SLE. So again, the 8th reason would be to improve the skin. So those are the 8 reasons off the top of my head why I would encourage people to stop eating wheat. I would encourage people to give up wheat for about 6 to 8 weeks. No wheat for 6 to 8 weeks. It's just try giving up one thing. Everything else you can keep the same. And tell me how you did after 8 weeks without eating wheat, and if you saw improvement in any of the areas that I've mentioned here today. I want to thank you for watching this brief video about why you should give up eating wheat. If you'd like to find out more about my work, my name is Dr. Whimsy Anderson. You can go to drwhimsy.com to find out more. And if you'd like to schedule an appointment for a health coaching session, you can do so by going to the services page on my website and clicking on telemedicine. I want to thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you next time. Take care.